Alright, for this video, we're going to be talking about digital audio workstations. This is an old one called Cool Edit Pro that was kind of popular when I was growing up, especially, amongst like the underground rap community. And it's pretty much antiquated now. I don't think anybody really uses it, but it's, kind of to drive the point home that pretty much all the digital audio workstations, DAWs, are pretty much the same thing. I mean, they have their, differences, but for the most part, they all kind of do the same thing. And if I were to make an analogy, I would say that it's like having an Xbox or a PlayStation. It doesn't really matter which one you have, especially if you have the exact same game. Madden, whatever year it is, Madden 2021, would be the exact same on an Xbox as it would be on a PlayStation. But people are going to have their preferences, so that's fine. Really popular one is Pro Tools, and this is very common for, professional studios. And again, you'll see it's very similar. Let me try to pull up a screenshot here. So you have basically all of these tracks, and you can also see these tracks here. Let me see if I can blow this up. And so you can see every single track basically has a different instrument in it. Right here we have, it's labeled bass. So all this green area right here is all the bass being played right here, and here. And then here, in these little gaps, you would have silence. And then here we have the acoustic guitar, and etc. And it's pretty much the same thing as Pro Tools. And I'm going to pull up a new one. This is the one that I'm going to be going over today, called Reaper. And I'm going to go ahead and, if you type it into Google, you should be able to find it. But if you go to reaper.fm/download.php, you'll be here. I have a 64-bit computer. If you don't know what you have, you can actually type it in. I'm just going to type in computer. It says this PC, right-click, properties, and it'll tell you system type. And then here's your 64-bit operating system or 32-bit. I'm going to go ahead and download. And we'll do a real quick installation. I agree. Next. I don't do anything fancy when it comes to installing. I normally just keep on clicking things until eventually I have the program I want. So that's all done. We're going to go ahead and click close. And we are going to go ahead and run it. One thing I will say about Reaper, it is free, but what happens very often is it might pop up and give you like a 5-second delay, and it's basically telling you, hey, you're using the trial version and we want you to buy our product, basically just give us money. But the trial version, quote-unquote trial version, is exactly the same. There is no drawback to having the trial version other than the fact you have to deal with them pausing your program every time you start it up for 5 seconds. If you can deal with that, this is 100% free. Now, this is a brand new project, so we don't have any tracks yet. You can double-click to create a track, or if you have files already that you want to import, just go up here, go to Insert Media File, and I put together a little thing. It's not good. I just wanted to give you a demonstration. So if you go ahead and highlight all the tracks that you have, I'm going to hit Enter. It'll ask you if you want to do separate tracks or one track, which means that if it did it in one track, it would put one file right here, and then right after that there'd be another file, and then another file, all in a series. So I'm going to click separate tracks, and what that does is it creates a different track for each individual instrument. But alternatively, if I didn't want to do that, you can just, again, double click here, and it will populate a new track, and you can go ahead and insert, an individual file one by one. Now, let me go ahead and click on this, and I can zoom in a little bit. And if you click on any one of these files, you can press Control, Shift, and then N, and that will normalize it. What that means is it will maximize the volume to the highest point that it can get to without going over the limit, and I'll show you what that is in a bit. But basically, when it gets too loud, it will clip, and you'll actually see a red indication, and you'll see it later when it gets too loud and it starts to clip. But I'm going to go ahead and do that for all of these. So as you can see, the waveforms are much bigger. All it did was amplify the sound. So if we go ahead and play everything together, and it might actually clip right now, so we'll see. I'm going to go ahead and turn down the volume. This is the master volume, so basically it turns everything down. I'm just going to turn that down about 3.73 decibels. As you can see, it's turned red right here, which means that it is in fact clipping. So we have the bass is in 1. If you click on this S right here, it will solo the track and you can press play. And sorry, I didn't mention this, but you can press your space bar and that will play. There should also be a play button, which is right here. I never actually used the button though, I always hit the space bar. So if you go ahead and play, because we have this soloed, the only thing you hear is this particular track, which is highlighted, and that's the bass. And you can control the volume of it with this knob right here. And if you want to look at a different instrument, you can go ahead and click on solo. Just make sure that you don't have both of them. If you have both of them, what it'll do is it'll play both of these. It'll keep everything else muted. And if you just go ahead and unsolo all of these, it'll play everything in the track, including whatever other tracks that you might have. You might have more. Again, you can keep adding as many as you need depending on, what kind of song you're doing. But I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all of these. So if you left click on this and then press shift and then click on the top one, it will automatically select all of these and you can hit delete and they'll disappear. I will press Control Z to undo that. You can alternatively control and click on any one of these, although if they're already selected, it will deselect them. So right now, as you can see, they're deselected. If I left click, it will select only this track. If I left click this one and this one, it'll select only these 2 tracks. But once again, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of them by Control here, and then I'm going to press Shift and then left click, and then that highlights all of them. And that will highlight everything from the bottom up to the top one that you clicked on. And then again, hit delete. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and click on File and just do a new project altogether. Now, one thing you can do is set the BPM of your beat. By default, it's 120. If you know what the BPM is, basically how fast it is, it means beats per minute. So I knew that one was 92. I could have imported it at 92. And really what that does is it will, let me just go ahead and show you real quick. Insert medium, and we'll just do it with let me do it with the snare just so you get an idea of the tempo. Zooming in, and again, Control, Shift, and normalize, and that's a pretty common one to know. Notice that every single time the snare hits, it's lined up with one of these lines, and the reason is because the BPM is set to the correct beats per minute for the actual track itself. The cool thing about that is if I move it to the left and move it to the right, it's still going to be synchronized. It's not going to be off tempo. If I have this to the wrong BPM, then it will be. Also, if you import a file and it already has a certain BPM, for example, this one has 92, if you change that to something else, I can change it to 120, it will automatically speed up the tempo. So I'm going to go ahead and click on File, New Project. If you're just starting out, you probably don't have tracked out beats. So when you have a different track for every single beat, like the drums and the piano, basically that's just called a tracked out beat. And if you buy a beat from a producer online, or if you're making a beat yourself, and you're going to take it to a recording studio and you want a really good professional quality sounding recording, you're going to want to have a tracked out beat. However, if you're starting out, I really don't think it's that important to focus so much on quality and trying to get, a fully mastered track and all that. I mean, you can spend all this money and time trying to make a track sound amazing, but if your skill level isn't up to par, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. That doesn't mean that you're going to have bad quality. It just means that it's not going to be, on the same level as, multi-million dollar rapper or singer or artist. So generally what I personally do is I just go online and I'll find a beat and I'll rap over it. And that's probably where you should start out. So I'm going to go ahead and left click here and do that 2 more times. And then I'll go ahead and insert media file and go to my desktop. And I found a beat online. And let me go ahead and I'm going to put this back up at the top. And when you have a beat that you download online, most of the time it is not going to be tracked out. It's just going to be one full beat. If you find, beats on YouTube like I did, let me go ahead and turn down the volume real quick. As you can tell, everything has already been mixed. The drums, the bass, and all that are all in one file and all in one track. So the only thing you have left to do is to record your vocals over it. Real quick, I just want to give credit to the producer of this beat, Angel La Cienza Beats on YouTube. And I just found it on YouTube, downloaded it. And now the only thing you need to do once you're at this point where you have a beat, and let me go ahead and click on solo because this was already soloed and this unsolos it. So now everything will play. If you left click on this red button right here, that will arm it for recording. As you can tell, my voice is playing feedback and it's coming back through the speaker. It is natural to have a little bit of latency when you're recording. If you go up to options and you go to preferences, what you can do is go to audio device and then wave out. And here you can change the buffer size to something like 512. And I would only do this while recording. And this is really only if it bothers you so much that you can't deal with it. But click OK. And then if you click on record, as you can tell, it's not as much of a delay in my voice. But the delay is still there. So again, if you go back to preferences and go to audio device, and it's already selected, and you can change this back to 1024. I would definitely have it up to 1024 whenever you're mixing your track and you're not actually recording. But I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And if you want to record, literally all you have to do is click on this, arm it for recording, and then click on this record button. So I'll demonstrate that real quick. Testing. As you can tell, my voice is being recorded, and it is populating whenever I talk. And then so disarming that for recording because obviously you don't want to hear my feedback. But if you go ahead and just click on play, you can hear testing. As you can tell, my voice is being recorded, and it is currently populating whenever I talk. Now, the next thing you can do is add effects onto your voice. So what we're going to do is go to the track where this is, and you can move this up or down into a different track. If you keep on scrolling down, it'll just add another track. And it really doesn't matter which one you have it in. What does matter is which channel you have your beat in and which channel you have your voice in. So, for example, you'll see in this one, every time that I'm talking in the vocal track, you'll see the audio moving, and then here you'll see it moving whenever there's any type of sound going in the beat. Testing. As you can tell, my voice is being recorded. So what you can do is add in effects. So I'm clicking FX, and there are a bunch of built-in effects. I don't really use most of these, but there are reverbs, there are compressors, there are delays, equalization, for example. So if I'm going to go ahead and click on REAEQ, which is an equalizer, and this is a graphic equalizer, there are already some presets built in. So you can go ahead and do wide male vocal. This is a preset. And this is on my vocals because this is the track that has my vocals on it, and this is the effects. So what I'm going to do is click on play, and you can hear it by itself, and then I'm going to turn up the frequency. And what that's going to do is basically filter out more and more of the low frequencies, and you'll only hear the high frequencies. And that's essentially what you do with an equalizer. This would be one frequency, this would be another frequency, and you can raise it or lower it or change it however you need to, kind of just go off of your ears. I'm going to go ahead and left click this again so it resets to the default. And again, I'm going to go ahead and left click and play this and let you hear what it sounds like when I increase the frequency that's being filtered out. Notice real quick that I have 2 selected, so all of these settings right here apply to the second frequency. It's called a band, so this is the first band, the second band, third band, and fourth band. So if I were to left click on this one, this gives me the details. This is the actual frequency itself. This is the gain, which is basically an increase in volume. And so we're going to go ahead and left click on one, and we're going to increase the frequency. First, I'm going to go ahead and play it and let you hear what it sounds like before I increase the frequency, and then you can hear what it sounds like after. Testing, testing. As you can tell, my voice is being recorded, and it is currently populating whenever I talk, and then you just rap. So we'll get into mixing a lot more later. I just wanted to point out that this is how you can do effects, is basically to just go to the track, click on effects. You have the opportunity to use effects on the beat itself. As you can tell, this is not a tracked out beat, so I highly advise that you don't mess with it, especially if you're first starting out. I normally never put any type of effects on the beat itself. I will only put effects on my own vocals. And that's because when you have layers and layers of drums and pianos or guitars or bass, they all have different frequencies. They're all overlapped with each other. And if you do any type of effect to one, you're going to do it to all of them, which is why it's better to have a tracked out beat, especially if you're going to a professional studio. However, none of that is actually necessary. One last thing I want to show you how to do is if you go to Google, I'm going to go ahead and install a VST, which is a virtual studio technology. I'm going to go ahead and use one I know, which is called Rough Rider, and it is a compressor. And if we go to audio damage, I'm going to use this one right here, left click. And you can download this file. So if I install, extract all, extract. So now if you go to the installer, you can left click on this and install it. Yes. It'll take a moment to install. Audio damage. Next, I agree. Install. And you're going to want whatever, if you have a 64-bit computer, you're going to want to use that. I just installed both of them. They're not that big as far as file size. Let me go ahead and restart. Actually, this is a good time to show you. I'm going to go ahead and go to Options and Preferences. And then if we go down to Plugins and VST. So what you can do is click on Clear Cache and rescan. What it'll do is rescan for any new plugins that you might have installed. Then click on OK. And again, we'll go back to FX. So if I left click, notice that I still have the EQ that I put on there earlier. Let me go ahead and put this back to the default wide male vocal. And what we can do is add another effect. And if you type in filter ROU, and then I'm not using the mono. This is an old installation I had that doesn't work anymore. But if you left click on this one, it is actually pretty big. And I don't think I can resize it at all, unfortunately. That's just the way it is. So you can also change around the order of this, and it does make a bit of a difference if you do the compressor first or the EQ first. I can't tell you which order is better. Really, you have to go based on your ears. I generally have a compressor first, and I'm just going to go ahead and left click here, and this one is called Good One. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is increase the ratio to 5:1. Increase the sensitivity up to about 50, and then let's go ahead and play it, and we'll play around with this a little bit. I'm going to turn down the attack. The attack is, we'll talk about mixing later, compressing and all that in the beat video, but attack is basically how fast the compressor happens. The release is how quickly it returns back to normal. Sensitivity is basically just that, how sensitive it is towards a certain level of sound. And again, we'll talk about a lot more of this in a lot more detail. I just want to give you the basics as far as recording. So go ahead and click on play, which is the space bar. Testing, testing. As you can tell, my voice is being recorded, and it is populating whenever I talk. and then you just wrap. And all you really need to do is keep on playing around with all these knobs, play around with the EQ, play around with the compressor, and we'll talk about these in a little bit more depth later. But essentially that's everything that you really need to know how to do. It is worth noting I only have one recording here, but you can also record over yourself. It is very common to do overdubs, which are basically just kind of rapping the same thing twice. Here's a quick example of that. Testing. As you can tell, my voice is being recorded, and it is currently... So if you click on Control Shift, Normalize, and let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit, make sure that these are lined up, which is what I would do if I were doing overdubs. And if you left click here, you'll hear that there are two different vocals. My voice is being recorded. Now we'll talk a lot more about mixing and everything. I just wanted to make sure that you have the very basic ability to record. If you're all done with your track, let's say that's everything that I wanted to record, and you might want to left click on this and kind of shorten it so you don't have any dead space here. Because there's always the possibility that if you zoom in, you have like this little click right here. You can tell that that's some kind of sound. You don't want that in your recording, so if I click on S, it will actually split so that these are separate. You can move it around, but I'm going to go ahead and click on delete so it's not there anymore. But it can also be a little bit tedious to do, so it really depends on, what you hear. You can also, again, solo this and listen to see what kind of background noise is going on in between. Recorded, and it is currently populating whenever I talk, and then you just... So if you want to get rid of all that extra noise, you would want to go in and click on S, and then you can just delete that right there, and that noise will be out of there. Once you're all done with your track, you can go ahead and zoom out, and I'm going to go to File, and then Render, and we'll go ahead and browse to my desktop. We can call it whatever you want, and then all you have to do then is just click on Render, and that will automatically save everything, close, and then you will have the file on your computer. Testing. As you can tell. And that's about everything for very basic recording. I did want to say one thing about VSTs real quick. We downloaded Rough Rider, the compressor, and there are all kinds of those. There are EQ, you have delays. When we get into, making beats, you'll actually see more of those, which are, synthesizers. Basically, they emulate different instruments like pianos and guitars. I'm going to be teaching beats using FL Studio, and FL Studio is another digital audio workstation. Technically, you could make beats in any DAW. You could make beats in Reaper. You can make them in Pro Tools. However, I have a preference for FL Studio, and we'll cover that later. So if I go to FL Studio and I open it up, I have it on my computer already. And again, we'll walk through all of that later. Don't get overwhelmed at all by this. I just want to demonstrate one quick point to you. So I'm going to go ahead and open up more plugins, and I think I already have it. Hold on, double check here. So if I type in Rough Rider, this is the same one I just downloaded. So what you'll notice is that this is the exact same compressor, the same VST. These are different digital audio workstations. One is Reaper, one is FL Studio, but they do the exact same thing. So it really doesn't matter which digital audio workstation you're using. That's why I say it's like having an Xbox versus a PlayStation. This is the video game. This is like playing Madden. It's the exact same game, regardless of whether you're using Pro Tools, whether you're using FL Studio, whether you're using Reaper. And there are probably thousands of VSTs, different equalizers, compressors, and everything that you can find online. Some of them are free. Some of them you have to pay for. So that's another area for you to have to delve into and kind of learn more about. But for now, I think, you have all the tools you need to just make a song. And I definitely encourage you to just jump in and try it, but then come back to these videos and start learning more and hopefully, improve your craft as far as, writing, rapping, all the other things that we're going to be covering in this series. All right, I'm back with a final edit here real quick. I wanted to make something clear, and this button up here, it's the magnet icon. If you have it enabled, what that will do is essentially if you want to move around a file, it could be any file, it could be this one up here, or in this case, I'm trying to move around my vocals. What it'll do is it will snap it's called a snap, and it will snap the vocal or the audio track to these lines that you see in the background. And these lines basically are determined by the BPM. So it's assuming that you have a beat that is 120 BPM, and it is snapping to that tempo. Now, I don't know for certain if each one of these little boxes is it could be a fourth of a full bar, which is basically a line of music, or it could be half, or it could be one full bar. It doesn't look like a full bar. I think it's a fourth, but that's not exactly important. What matters is that if you want to move your vocals around, I normally just go in here and I disable the snap. That way you have the freedom to move it wherever you want to. And you especially want to do this if you don't know what the BPM is. You would leave this alone and not do anything with the BPM. You would just immediately record, and then once you're done recording, you can move this around if needed. It might not be necessary to move it around, but sometimes when you record, there'll be a delay and it might mess up your flow a little bit. I just wanted to show you real quick. If you go, in case you want to know what the BPM is, they have tempo tappers, and there's one built into the program, I believe, but I just go on Google and type in tempo tapper. This is one. So I'm just refreshing here, and I found a random beat on YouTube. Nothing special about it. I just pulled it up, and I just wanted to demonstrate real quick. In Western music, most of hip hop and pop in America, and even different areas of Europe, they have a 4/4 tempo. What that means is there's a rhythm of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So we're going to count that out in order to figure out what the tempo is on the tempo tapper. And what you want to listen for is the snare. So you're going to hear it in this beat: snare, 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 snare. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Around 78, 79, possibly even 80. There is some margin for error. You really have to time it well, and you might maybe look up online. There might be some better tempo tappers that will give you a more accurate answer. But that's part of why I don't use BPM a lot. I normally just turn off the grid. If you're making your own beat, what tempo you have, because you made the beat and it'll be in a certain tempo. But if you're just finding a beat online, it might be hard to tell. So I would probably, set this to 78, experiment with it a little bit. If it seems off, then maybe move it up to 79. I think, it's very common for people to have increments of 10 or even increments of 5 because, these are people making it. And it seems rare that people would use a 78 or 79. But anyhow, that's all I wanted to cover and make sure that Next video, we'll start talking about writing.